Of Who's Better Baseball, the podcast where we talk about who's better at baseball. A lot of exciting topics to discuss today. A matchup from over the weekend of a couple division rivals we want to talk about. One that's going to be a huge matchup between some of the best teams in baseball with the Orioles and the Yankees that we'll touch on as well. But first things first, how did you enjoy your weekend, Patrick, watching some Rockies baseball, assuming at even higher altitude?
Almost a mile and a half above sea level, believe it or not, at 7,300 feet above sea level in Mexico City, the Mexico City series. Not as lively as last year's competition with Giants Padres, but of course, I think most of us were just watching that as totally, a bystander, if you will. But seeing the Rockies struggle, they struck out maybe 25 times in 2 games. They didn't walk at all on Sunday. Only 6 runs in that offensively charged environment. They are struggling, and they've tied a record for trailing in every single game to start their season, tied with the 1910 St. Louis Browns. But maybe things are going to go their way because they've got the Miami Marlins on Tuesday, but that's at sea level. So I don't know. We could be looking at a very, very rough start.
How did Framber pitch?
Well, he was pitching against the Rockies, so he looked pretty good. He looked pretty good coming off the IL there, and in a big spot, and did really solid. Austin Gomber was solid for the Rockies as well. 7 innings pitched, didn't walk anyone, and gave up 3 home runs. Only the 3rd time a Rockies pitcher had ever done that. First ever, ya boy, because he's a Met, Mike Hampton.
How about that? Yeah, Mike Hampton, who went there for the school system in Colorado.
That's right.
So I was curious about Framber because we did talk about Astros last week, and we'll see if they can pull themselves out of it. I was shocked prepping for the show today, and we have an athletics topic, so we can save it. But the fact that the A's are ahead of the Astros in the standings, it was just jarring to see. And it seems like the Mariners and the Rangers are starting to pull away a little bit, but we'll see if Houston, with a healthy rotation, can actually get back in the mix. Before we talk about Mason Miller, that's the A's topic we got on deck, I want to go over the big series from the weekend, which was Tigers-Royals. I feel like we've talked about these teams a lot so far this year. We kind of have a fascination about the AL Central, but we got to see them up close. I think going into the series, we would have said the Royals are better, but guess who won the series? The Detroit Tigers. So what are some of your takeaways from these two teams finally getting to square off against each other here?
I was digging into some numbers on the Tigers, and they weren't too positive as far as their offense goes. 2nd time, 3rd time through the order, not having as much luck, which obviously raises some suspicion. But that being said, they were able to come back on Saturday night in a major way, and again, kind of send a message that, hold on a second, the Royals, as far as the new darlings of the American League and American League Central in specific, you know what? The Tigers are still in that hunt too. They might not have that same flashy player as a Bobby Witt Jr., but Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, and company are definitely hanging in there. And I think they were impressive, giving the starting pitchers that they ended up facing this weekend. What were some of your biggest takeaways?
It's funny. I was looking through the stats really quickly here because our Just Fantasy Baseball show, the title of their podcast today, which I helped them get up, but didn't get a chance to watch this yet, was should you pick up Javi Baez in fantasy? So I was very curious. I'm like, what's he been doing? Last 2 weeks, I guess, compared to Javi Baez of recent, 7 strikeouts in 13 games is an improvement. But he's not really tearing the cover off the ball. It's been Mark Canha that's been the big bat for the Tigers up to this point. I think for me, the first game of the series, we had an article that went up on the site talking about the Royals turnaround, and I was editing that, and I added some color into it because the Royals had played that first game of the series, and Seth Lugo, 7 shutout innings, 9 strikeouts against the Tigers, and they also scored 7 runs late in that game, capped off by a Bobby Witt triple that I think drove in 3. So I think when I would look at these two teams, I think my initial takeaway would be I like the Royals rotation. With that said, in this series, Casey Mize fought through some things, had a decent start, and Tariq Skubal showed that he might be the best pitcher on either of these teams. So I think the fascinating thing is this could be the race this year. I mean, these two teams could be in it all year long, and they might actually fight for a wild card spot because this Guardians team is above them still. So it's a crazy division to try to monitor.
It's been really fun seeing these two teams get some of the attention that they've been able to garner. And I think rightfully so with Scooble's start today, gives up that run in the first inning and immediately bounces back and is fantastic for the next 6 shutout innings. At that point, still maintaining, I wouldn't say his lead, but definitely his front runner status as American League Cy Young Award candidate, right? Whereas Royals might not have one of those guys, but they've got a few of those guys on the edges, as we've kind of alluded to a little bit. What's interesting about the Royals and where they're at right now, not too far ahead of the Tigers in the standings, is the fact that they are very much ahead in run differential. If you had thrown out what the Yankees were able to do today against the Brewers, and we'll talk about the Yanks in a bit, the Kansas City Royals would have been in sole possession of the second best run differential in the American League. So you mentioned how good the starting pitching has been as a rotation, everyone being healthy, knock on wood, but it's also been the offense contributing and doing it really well. So they're getting contributions from everybody on Matt Quatraro's staff. And you look up and you say, if you don't know who that guy is, it probably wouldn't surprise you to know he's a former Tampa Bay Ray coach. And those guys usually end up working out for their new organization.
Yeah, they're getting so much out of that staff right now. And looking at the offense you're mentioning, so I was trying to dig into the run differential stuff. They had a blowout against the Twins. They beat up the White Sox a couple times, and they also had a few really lopsided games against the Astros to build up that run differential. And I was, kind of going through the schedule and how they got off to this start, and playing the White Sox 7 times helped. They took 6 of 7, so that was big for them. But there was a skid here where, let's say, they lost the final game that they had played of those 7 against the White Sox. They took one against the Orioles, then they lost the series, and then they lost the first game against Toronto. So they had a stretch where they lost 4 or 5 and could have kind of slid back. And then they end up beating the Blue Jays, and then they end up taking the first game against the Tigers. So I'm in a position with the Royals where I still don't know how much to buy into a great start. But I think when you look at the pieces there, and particularly when you see the rotation that we like, and have Vinny Pasquantino looking like the hitter that we've been expecting him to be for years, injuries getting in the way, and Salvador Perez, which we talked about in the last show, having him back to this great level with Pasquantino, Perez, Witt, I buy into the lineup too. I think the only thing I don't buy into entirely is the bullpen, but there's a lot to like with this Royals team.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Everybody's playing to their potential. There's not one guy carrying the entire roster. It's everyone contributing, playing as well as you think they can be, and still with some more room, where I think Pasquantino is definitely capable of doing more than what we've seen so far. We know what Bobby Witt Jr. Is capable of doing, and just completely taking over the game. He had a couple nice highlight reel plays, and then Salvador Perez, again, just being that constant in the middle of that lineup. So I think the Royals are just set up really well for the season, and their ownership has, committed to this roster and winning. And I think the Tigers are in the same boat too. A lot of that having to do with the new CBA and the fact that you can't be bad every single year and get a top 10 pick. So I believe both the Tigers and the Royals are out of the top 10. So you know what? They might as well start spending, bringing in some of those fringe middle class tier free agents. And I think they're going to, go after. We'll have to get to that at some point. And I know someone will here at Just Baseball in regards to players that could be available at the trade deadline this summer.
Yeah, we are going to have an article come out this week, top 10 players, and we can kind of come on Who's Better at some point, discuss that list and how it might fit on for some teams like this that could be in the race, and the deadline could be a separator. The thing about the Tigers that really fascinates me is this rotation, because their bullpen has been lights out this year. I think it'll continue. If one of the best closers in baseball now, all of a sudden, kind of another pop-up guy in Jason Foley, who, he's been good, but now in the closer role, really delivering for them. Casey Mize is this kind of X factor that they got, right? I think he went 1-1, if I'm not mistaken, right? So a guy that was set back, but not just Tommy John. He had a back surgery, and he said even the back surgery was the greater relief for him to get his back right. Now, all of a sudden, you got another guy in that rotation that could be a frontline guy. So if Mize can keep this up and give them a Robin to Scoople's Batman, I could also buy the stock in the Tigers being the better team between these two.
Yeah, my only concern with Mize is playing a full season, right? After
Yeah.
coming back from his injury. So they have to be cautious with that at some point, but you'd rather have him have this early success right now, ride him as that hot hand, and then see about a little bit of that load management in general. Reese Olson, I think, has been a positive surprise. And then the 2 free agents that you ended up bringing in to kind of lead the way. I'm not going to say they haven't worked out yet because we're only talking about 5 starts, but Jack Flaherty and Kenta Maeda combining for an ERA somewhere around mid-5. So, those guys, just need to eat up innings on days that Schoolball's not in there, going 7 strong as this Cy Young kind of candidate. And then, maybe you get something with Matt Manning when he's around, when he's healthy, which you got to cross your fingers on him being able to do it for a full season.
Yeah, it's a rotation that can be volatile, but has certainly enough. And I think I like the Royals a little bit more, but at the same time, when I look at these total teams, it is teams that I think are very close to each other. It's hard for us to actually pick one, which is what I'm actually going to ask you to do right now. Who's better? Tigers, Royals. If you had to pick right now, one of these teams is going to make the playoffs. Who would you lay your money on?
I'm leaning on the run differential of the Kansas City Royals. I really like what they did in the offseason. Not flashy moves, kind of doing the thing that, I think a lot of teams and fan bases were used to seeing in the 90s, maybe even in the early 2000s, of just bringing in some veteran presence to surround their young players and support that. And I think both Tigers and the Royals did it well, but the Royals, did it a little bit better with their starting pitching options and with everything that Kansas City is trying to do, and maybe coaxing the voters of that area to say, hey, maybe can you fund a new stadium? Well, let's win some baseball games first. So they've got a little bit more at stake. So altogether, it's going to be fun watching these two teams. But right now, I think the Kansas City Royals are going to be that better bet to make the postseason in October. Are you leaning the same way as me, or are we going to try to have a little bit more of an entertaining podcast here? And you disagree? Which side of the fence you landed on?
I'd love to disagree with you, but I can't. I think the thing for me that because like I said, it's close. I mean, I could talk myself into the Royals rotation over the Tigers, but then the Tigers bullpen over the Royals bullpen, and I can do that as much as I can try to make that case for Detroit. But the thing that has me coming back to the Royals is a guy that we spent some time talking about in the last show, and that's Bobby Witt Jr. I don't see that superstar in the Tigers right now. So until they have a guy, until Spencer Torkelson or Riley Green or Kerry Carpenter, until one of these guys takes a big leap and maybe the collective ends up being better, I'll just side with the team that has an MVP candidate on it to find their way closer to October. I still don't know if either of them gets in, but I think if I had to put my money on one of them, it would be Kansas City right now.
It makes for such a great story, I think, just in the sporting world with the success, obviously, that the Chiefs have had, and now the Lions, being as successful as they've been. So it's like Detroit and Kansas City. I feel like they're very much tied to one another, and in the American League Central, they absolutely are.
For sure. It's going to be a fun race, and one that's competitive, but maybe not quite as competitive as the American League East, which brings us to a topic that, you actually sent me some topics. You said, should we talk Yankees Orioles? And I'm like, Patrick, I didn't tell you this. I've been sitting on Yankees Orioles for weeks now because I've wanted to talk about these two teams. But then I saw this matchup, a 4-game set between the Yankees and the Orioles, that we should probably wait for that series. And so here it is. The Yankees carry a 1-game lead in this division right now. They've played 2 more games. They're even in the loss column, but the Yankees have 19 wins to the Orioles 17. But who's better? Yankees, Orioles. This is going to be a fun series.
It is, yeah. And we get 4 games too. We get to be spoiled a little bit there where it's not just 3. And I'm not going to say it's in a better environment right now, but I love narratives. I love the storyline of the Orioles packing out their own ballpark there at Oriole Park at Camden Yards, partially because, for anyone that knows and is aware in the Northeast, when the Orioles were bad, and this was even true, I think, even when they've been good in the 2000s and early 2010s, Yankees fans save a buck or two by spending a weekend or a week in Baltimore. They save money by going and getting some really good seats. So the Yankees will swarm Camden Yards, and that just isn't the case right now. So I love that Orioles fans are going to fill up Orioles Park there for this series of 2 of the best teams in the American League, 2 of the most star-studded teams, and how they did it totally different ways. One's homegrown, One is purchased, if you will, or at least retained, because Aaron Judge was homegrown. And it's just there's nothing better right now. Kind of the Goliath, and then the new younger Goliath Jr. That is the Baltimore Orioles.
Yeah, they're certainly becoming a Goliath with the way that they've been able to develop that talent. And we talked about this on yesterday's or last show as well, where just to have so many options to plug in. Jackson Holiday gets demoted, and they still just have a ridiculous lineup. And they could go to Kobe Mayo before Jackson Holiday to fill it out. They are getting so much production from that lineup. I think let's actually take this piece by piece. Which lineup would you prefer? The Yankees with Juan Soto, who, by the way, is getting on base at a 443 clip. I feel like, again, right, he's done that many times throughout his career. And Judge hasn't even gotten going. Judge hitting below the Mendoza line, only has 5 home runs, and Soto's leading the team with 7. Verdugo off to a good start for the Yankees. Anthony Volpe off to a good start. Giancarlo Stanton with 6 home runs, and maybe not old Giancarlo Stanton, but good enough in that DH spot. They're getting a ton of production in this lineup. I mean, it's a really good team right now. It's hard to pick against the young guns in Baltimore, but man, do the Yankees have a better lineup right now?
No, I'm taking the Orioles. I am. And again, going back to this series being in Baltimore, I think can be very helpful where it's pressure packed, but there's the familiarity of your home stadium. And I think once we start getting deeper into that season, and when we do get to October and the Orioles are there, it will be very interesting to see how these young guys respond to that pressure packed environment that's there in October, where every game virtually is a must win. But the depth of the Orioles lineup right now is just so strong. And the options that they have both on their bench and in AAA and in Norfolk, there is just kind of unparalleled. And the Yankees are one of those teams where either they produce players out of thin air, that will happen again this season, or players just put on the uniform and they magically get better. So that's something that we haven't totally seen from the Orioles yet. They just aren't one of those franchises right now. But we talked about on the last show the fact that they're able to really develop well at the major league level. So I think the coaching staff could help, tighten up the gap, if you will, as far as just the magic of the laundry that comes with playing in New York. But I'm taking the Orioles lineup right now, despite the fact that there is so many things going well right now in the Bronx. As you said, are you joining me on that one, or is it a tie? You can also go that route as well.
No, I think I'll play some devil's advocate on this one because we still haven't seen what the Yankees can be because Aaron Judge hasn't gotten going yet. But that combination of Soto and Judge, it's better than anything the Orioles could put together this year. I think in a couple years, maybe they'll have a couple hitters that can be that good. But I like Juan Soto and Aaron Judge in a playoff series to be able to make a lot happen. The depth does skew to Baltimore, but I think there is a chance that the Yankees could have the better lineup because they've been able to really, put up great numbers offensively without their best hitter. And I'm just imagining being able to see Soto and Judge when they're both going at the same time. And it's something that outside of maybe Los Angeles right now at the Dodgers, we just don't see that level of superstar share a lineup. I mean, you're seeing it, like I just said, with the Dodgers. I guess maybe the Braves a little bit, but Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, I think they could have the better lineup. Currently, I'd say the Orioles probably are just better top to bottom, but I think there'll be a point this year where the Yankees really get going. If it's at the right time, they can make a lot of noise in the playoffs.
Orioles, even after the 15-run barrage by the Yankees today against the Brewers, have scored more runs in general too. So again, that's one of those factors. Yeah, we're gonna be fighting all season long. We really should just pick a side. I'll have to start wearing a lot more orange now. I mean, you've already got a lot of New York gear. You got to be careful. You've already put down the Phillies here and there, or rather, you've propped up the Phillies, and now you're taking the Yankee side. Ryan, you are the man of the people. You are an honest guy. You've got no biases whatsoever. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in this series, like you said, with the lineups, with that environment. Will Judge be able to hit one out in left field in that new cavern that they've created? Doesn't impact Juan Soto. We know it hasn't impacted Gunnar Henderson at all as well. So these two teams, man, again, firepower all over. But lineup, I'm sticking with the Orioles. You want to shift things over to the starting rotations because we're only going to see 4 of those guys, and anytime you match up with another club for this many games, you're not necessarily going to have the best matchups. You're not even necessarily going to have the 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, etc. But we are going to see, some of the best from both of these squads. We know there's a few more guys on the IL right now that can only make this series even better. But the pitching matchups with the rotations, not just in the series, but going forward between the Orioles and Yankees, who are you feeling that you like a little bit more right now?
Well, I got to say this, as much as this is a great matchup between these two teams, I'm looking at the pitching probables, and there is not a sexy pitching matchup that I can sink my teeth into. You got Clark Schmidt versus Grayson Rodriguez, Nestor Cortez versus Dean Kramer, Luis Gil versus Corbin Burns, and then Carlos Rodon against TBD right now. So we'll see maybe they sneak somebody in there that makes that matchup look better. But just looking at what we've seen this year, the Yankees have kind of had the better rotation, and that surprises me. They've gotten a lot more than I would have expected out of Rodon. Stroman has been great. I guess I would have bet that Stroman would have been better than Rodon, but just to see the fact that they've gone without Cole and have put together a good rotation, it's been surprising to me. I don't know how much longer they can get this from Rodon. Is he just fully back? If he is, I think that changes the equation. But so far the Yankees have been better over the course of the year. I think I would like the Orioles rotation more, but it's pretty close. And obviously Cole is the big question there. If they get Cole back, that changes the math for us.
It is. And if the Orioles are going to be able to get back Kyle Bradish, which he's a potential guy that could start that game on Thursday. Bradish still can't really hold the cleats of Garrett Cole. But even still, that does give you out a little bit more depth because you need that entire 40-man roster and then some. And so you've got to be able to have that depth. And I think that's one of the other areas where, as I said with the lineup, where I think the Orioles have a little bit of that advantage right now as being able to go a little bit deeper down to Norfolk to tap into some guys in the starting rotation. I think you're right. The Yankees have been better overall, and they haven't needed to rely on their ace and Garrett Cole, whereas the Orioles are doing it with their guy right now in Corbin Burns. But they've got some horses in the stable looking to get healthy and looking to get right as well.
And with Baltimore, you got Cade Povich, who's getting close. I know we had an article come up this week about the top AL prospects who are close to making their debut. And since that article was in the works, 2 of them came up. It was Heston Kjerstad, and I think Addison Barger that made debuts. And now a third one, the prospect from the Astros, Joey Lapafito, he's getting called up. So if you're in that article, it seems like the debut is coming. So Cade Povich might be next. And he's put up great numbers this year. That would take the Orioles rotation to another level. I think for me, as we weigh this out throughout the year, if Carlos Rodon is this, if Marcus Stroman stays healthy, and if Garrett Cole comes back, I think I would lean Yankees are better. But that's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts. And I think the Orioles have a lot more answers to get through the full season.
Yeah, I like Clark Schmidt. I think he's kind of slept on. It's amazing how many he fits that mold of a guy every few years with the Yankees. They're kind of overlooked in a lot of ways. I mean, you could say that about their closer Clay Holmes, which we'll talk about in a little bit when we get to closer conversation. But Clark Schmidt, I think, is really solid. And again, Stroman, Rodon, and then Nestor Cortez, right? Who obviously took a step back after that big All-Star and breakout season in 2021. He's been really solid with a 3.5 ERA. So it's really close to call in general. I think the upside maybe for some of the Orioles guys, it seems like it could be higher, right? Because they're younger. So you go, man, is this a guy that could also finish 4th in the AL Cy Young Award race like a Kyle Bradish? Or will it just be a pretty good starter, with a sub-4 ERA, and you need those guys? Or are they going to be the best of the best? Are they going to be able to ratchet it up like we know Carlos Rodon can, and Marcus Stroman can, and Nestor Cortez and Garrett Cole when he's healthy? So I think for that reason, it's not as sexy. Doesn't feel as good as when I picked the Orioles as the best lineup. I think I would lean towards the Yankees as having the better rotation.
Yeah, it's close. It's very close. I think on every facet, I think maybe the biggest discrepancy might be the bullpens, because the Yankees are they always have a good bullpen. Like every year, they're usually a winning team every year. They are a winning team every year. and they always have a good bullpen. I'm looking right now at the stats. Not even getting a ton of strikeouts, only 7.26 strikeouts per nine for their pen, but a 2.74 ERA. And Baltimore got to scroll down a little bit there at 3.94. So you got the Yankees with the fourth best bullpen ERA in baseball, Orioles 16th best, and the Yankees have covered more innings as well. So they haven't got as much length from their starters. They've covered about 12 more innings. So I think that's a little more of a slam dunk conversation. What I'm not sure about is Felix Bautista eligible to come back this year? Because that's going to help Baltimore a lot as you get to the playoffs. I know he got Tommy John late last year. Relievers, maybe the timetable is a little bit shorter. So I think that's something to monitor. But right now, when it comes to the bullpens, I think the Yankees have a clear edge.
Yeah, I think Batista didn't have his surgery basically until the offseason in October. So more likely than not, he might not be a factor. But you're right, he could return. Is he going to be the Felix Batista that, was in the All-Star game last year in Seattle? Like, maybe not. But you're right. You'd rather have that guy doing that coming off the IL with Tommy John. So we will wait and see what happens. But like you said, it's the Yankees bullpen has been definitely easily a tick above and better. And like you said, they've had to work a little bit harder than the Orioles bullpen, which leads you to believe that the starting rotation for Baltimore has been a little bit better. But the Yankees, it's going to be interesting to see how they deploy their bullpen, because right now they're in the midst of a 17-day stretch without a day off. Wow. They won't get their next one until May 6th, I believe. So, they got to be a little bit cautious there. You don't want to run those guys into the ground, this early in the year, but these are big games against the Orioles. So if you're going to do that now, it's going to be worth that much more than, against pretty much any other divisional opponent, let alone league opponent.
Well, when it comes to managing that bullpen, they have Michael Tonkin there. It's been passed around the league. And so if there's a mop-up duty opportunity, Tonkin can go out there, give them 45 pitches, and get DFA'd for like the 5th time this year. He's had a rough go of it. We'll see if he can stick with the Yankees. He's already had 2 tours of duty with the Mets in the first month of the season. So that's impressive to get passed around like that. This is his 4th team now, or I guess his 4th stint, two stints with the Mets. Looking at the complete picture, though, between these two teams, I think we were split on the lineup, the rotation. We kind of agree on the bullpen, but that's not going to factor as much as the other two components. So if you're picking right now, who's going to win the American League East? Is it the Orioles again, or is it the Yankees?
I'm picking the New York Yankees right now. Maybe it's the chalk. Maybe it has something to do with, again, these young guys not having done it yet in high leverage situations or high pressure kind of environments. They did it last year, obviously during the regular season, but I'm taking the Yankees. I know Back It Up Binge podcast in our chat here on YouTube, which again, we go live every Sunday evening and then midweek. So feel free to jump in when we're live. You can also leave comments as well. We'll take a look at those all throughout during the week and during any of these conversations. But yeah, I'm taking the Yankees right now. Again, it doesn't feel great because the sexy pick is definitely the Orioles. We know how fun and exciting that is. And now Jackson Holliday, when he comes up, you go, oh, he's got something to prove. Let's see what this kid's got. If he's got that moxie, it wasn't born with that golden spoon in the same way where he's had the golden spoon at every level. That's a big hiccup, getting sent back down after struggling in the way that he did. We know that there are plenty of other all-time greats who've had that same kind of start and were able to rebound back. So I think a lot of people are hoping for that. But until that happens, I'm going to lean towards the New York Yankees right now. They split the series. Do they win it? And is this series the be all end all to actually tell us who is the better team right now? I think in this series this week, it does actually tell us a lot about who is better. Are you joining me? Are you taking the Yankees? What do you think is going to happen in the series this week? Is somebody going to go 3 out of 4, or is it going to be a split? What'd you take, Ryan?
I don't know. I don't know how this series is going to go. It's tough to predict. I could see this being a series where the Orioles at home take the series and then even up the division or at least make it closer. I'm always horrible at that math. If you take 3 or 4, you're down a game. Yeah, you go up, right? Regardless, it's tough for me to pick who's better right now and then who's going to be better, because the Yankees are a team that you would think would aggressively add at the deadline with the 1 year of Juan Soto. But how much money do they have to add onto the books? And then also you look at the Orioles and you think new ownership syndrome, right? Like this would be the first deadline where they can make some moves. Are they going to trade from their prospect? So because of what I actually think could be a more aggressive team at the deadline, because of the upside of some of the prospects that are coming, K. Povich, like I mentioned, I think in the long run, the Orioles will be the better team this year. I think at this present moment right now, the Yankees are currently better. But if I had to pick one for the whole season, I'm picking Baltimore.
I think the silver lining, should the Orioles lose this series, is that you're right. New ownership is going to say, we need to do more to contend with this team. Maybe we don't have it. We're close, but we need more. It's almost if you win the series, ownership goes, we're good. I like where we're at. Of course, they're still going to add. They're still going to improve, but maybe it puts an unintended but positive chip on your shoulder if you do lose the series. But yeah, if Baltimore wins the series, they'll actually go a full game ahead of the Yankees. So that's their only way. Split, they just stay exactly where they're at. They lose the series. Now the Yankees are getting away from them just a little bit.
I'm glad you did that math for me because you clearly saw me struggling trying to figure it out in my head. The magic number at the end of the year, it's always rough. It's always
the math is basically like every game that one team plays is a half of a win in the standings.
Yeah.
Right. So if you win 3 against a team that's ahead of you who only wins 1, that's 2 games more. So 2 times a half. No, wait, no, that's 2 games ahead and they're 1 game behind. Nope. Sorry. Baseball math. It made sense to me, but I totally botched that one.
Yeah. You fumbled it on that one. Let's move over. You sounded smart on the beginning of it. You should have just left it. You should have taken the compliment and then just move forward. The explanation, it hurt you.
We'll edit this out. This isn't live or anything, is it?
Oh yeah. Well, I'll make sure that this part's clipped at the end of that video on the Yankees and Orioles. I'm not going to embarrass you twice. We'll move over now, though, to a guy that's embarrassing a lot of hitters in Major League Baseball, particularly Baltimore. To see, I know when we had an article that went up on Mason Miller. Love the title. I think it was Amongst the Clouds. Mason Miller is the brightest star in Oakland. That was Clay Snowden who wrote that title. Typically, I have to rewrite Clay's title, so I appreciated that one from him. It was good. He went up against the Orioles in an extra innings game, so ghost runner on second, and just shut them down. Got a couple of strikeouts. The last one against Gunnar Henderson to close out the inning, and it was just 3 straight fastballs. Just I'm gonna rear back and fire, and you can't touch me. And he got fired up after. And if you look at that Oakland team that I said is surprisingly ahead of the Astros in the standings, then I mean, we shouldn't celebrate a 12-17 team, but considering everything in Oakland, that is overperforming in a large way. It's due to having this guy, Mason Miller, that's closing every big game for him. He's been unbelievable.
And that's the most exciting part of a lot of teams' games, right? Frankly, for the Rockies, that's exciting. The 9th, the light show comes out and you close it out with a win and you go home happy and feeling a little bit better about your team, despite where they might be in the standings. You have a 2-hit game, have a 3-hit game, 2 singles and a double. There's not the same amount of excitement per moment as when you have 3 hits, but when you're closing out a ball game like that, like Mason Miller has been doing against a team that everyone regards as one of the best in the American League, strike out 2 guys that are doing really great. Right, I think he struck out Cole Kauser right before that Gunnar Henderson one. Mason Miller, the numbers jump off the page, jump off the screen. He's been amazing. His last 7 appearances, all 7 saves, 16 strikeouts in 7 1/3 innings pitched. He has not allowed a run in his last 9 games. That's 11 1/3 innings pitched, 24 strikeouts. He's striking out more than 2 per inning. We just have never seen that ever in the history of baseball. Again, we're only 1 month in, so he's got a long way to go. But literally, if you were to sort on StatHead, which is what I use, I swear by it, and you were to look at a guy and say, all right, you got to have at least 10 saves, right? Maybe you had an abbreviated year, maybe you were hurt. Let's just sort it from that. Minimum 10 saves. If you're looking at the greatest strikeouts per 9, The all-time greatest is Aroldis Chapman when he was still with the Reds, 17.7. And your boy, Edwin Diaz, was the only other guy just above 17 with 10 or more saves as a closer. Mason Miller, what we've seen so far, even though it's only been a month, we're talking an all-time great month for a closer so far.
Yeah, he's got to keep this up for us to actually say, oh, yeah, he's the best closer in baseball. But currently at this moment, he's one of those guys you hand the ball to and say he's got the most overpowering stuff imaginable. And then Edwin Diaz, he kept that strikeout per nine over 17 for a full season in 2022 and ended up saving 32 games. Mason Miller, I don't know how many opportunities he's going to get. It's pretty crazy that he's gotten 10 opportunities, and the Athletics have 12 wins. I mean, that just shows you if they're winning, Miller's on the mound pretty much. I was surprised to see that they won a one-run game today that I don't believe he was on the mound for. I'm guessing he just had been overused at that point, but he's electric. And when you have a fastball that's averaging over 100 miles per hour and then a slider that tunnels it really well, and hitters have to cheat. The only way you can catch up to his fastball is to cheat for it, and then he drops that slider on you. It's tough. And I mean, in the article we had here, there's some video of Aaron Judge just looking brutal against Mason Miller. And I'm sure Judge has had some ugly swings against a lot of guys this year with the season he's had. But I mean, he just looks, it's like varsity versus JV, and it's Aaron Judge. Miller's impressive.
We might as well start nicknaming Mason Miller the cheat code, because it's like he has the cheat code. Like you said, hitters, they need to go and cheat on that fastball a little bit. And it makes sense. Mason Miller, 86 pitches of 100 miles an hour or greater. That's most in the majors. 9 of the 10 fastest pitches that we've seen this season are from Mason Miller, and he has the fastest at 103.7, folks. Like, that's what this guy is working with. And so that's nice that, again, A's fans, they don't have a lot to be happy about right now. And so to go home happy after seeing their guy close a game out, one of, not only 7 saves, but 7 saves. There's a lot of guys with 8 or 9 ahead of him. But if you're looking at guys with 7 or more saves, he's one of only 4 right now that have not blown a save. So he's been very effective in that spot, totally shut down so far. And you really hope that continues. And maybe part of this question of him being the best closer in baseball, he's more than likely going to be an all-star this year for the A's.
Yeah.
If you are the American League manager, if you are Bruce Bochy down in Texas, your home ballpark, right? And because you're managing the all-star game, if you're Bruce Bochy, are you giving the ball to Mason Miller in the 9th inning and during the all-star game to get the final 3 outs to get against the NL?
I think so. The all-star game, especially not the World Series, is not tied to it. It's about showcasing stars. And that's the moment right there. I'd as much as I'm a National League guy, I would love to see the National League side have a lead by the 9th inning. To see Mason Miller be able to step out on that national stage after pitching most of this year in Oakland, where it's actually amazing the coverage he's even gotten considering the team he's on. But you give him a chance to blow some 104-mile-per-hour cheese by some guys in the Midsummer Classic. I think that's going to be an awesome moment. And it could be the lead into my final kind of note on Mason Miller. He's not a free agent until 2030, but he's a closer, and Oakland is in a rebuild. Would you consider, or should they consider, floating Mason Miller at the deadline? Because you would get a ridiculous haul for that level of a closer, and the value you could get back is probably more than a closer could ever give you in his years with the team. It's going to be a conversation. So what would your thoughts be on that? Do you just hang on to a guy this good, or do you take advantage of the hype?
Yeah, depending on what Major League Baseball and the other owners that I would confer with about this, because we know the optics would not be great for a move like that. Unless I was somewhat coerced and certain things were pointed out about it, you absolutely have to consider trading a guy when his stock has never been higher. Closer, the role itself is volatile. A pitcher throwing that fast, his health, absolutely volatile. You don't need to retain certain players, certain names, familiar faces, something that the Rockies do a lot, and it's worked for them on the business side. You don't need to retain those familiar faces to have fans continue to come out to the ballpark. You're going someplace new next year, and according to the owner, hey, people are going to be excited to go see the opposing teams players, right? So I think that would be great. I think it might be a little surprising to find out how much he could actually get, because I don't think we're looking at like 2 top 100 prospects, maybe definitely one, but I don't know that it would be 2 and then a fringy one, because again, teams know about that volatility. But you know what? If you want to strike while the iron's hot, you're gonna have to pay somewhat of a premium, and I think the A's, I think they'd be helping themselves out in a big way to be really aggressive in this way, because to my knowledge, I don't know that we've ever seen any candidate for the Rookie of the Year award get traded in their year. I don't think it's happened at all. And so Mason Miller, is there a better chance that he wins the American League? Look, I'm turning the tables on you, buddy. You want to throw some hot questions at me? I'm gonna throw one at you. Are there odds better that he gets traded? Wow. I mean, are there odds better that he closes out the All-Star game than he wins the Rookie of the Year award in the American League this season? Which one of those two would you take?
I think there's a better chance that he's going to close out the All-Star game because I think he'll be there. And the way he's pitching, I think he'd be the choice. A reliever winning the Rookie of the Year is tough. It could happen for sure, but with some of the rookies that could be available, with Colton Cowser, we talked about the start he's gotten off to, Evan Carter. Are those position players going to end the season with an F4, north of 5? In which case, I don't know if Miller does win it. But then again, if he stays on the Athletics all year, if they win 74 games, which is way more than any of us would have had, and Miller has saved like 45 games or 50, like he could save a ridiculous amount. Like I said, he's saved 10 of their 12 wins. He's got a shot. He's a dark horse. He makes me want to look at the Rookie of the Year odds and see if I can throw a little money on that, because those odds can be pretty long. He's going to be an interesting guy to watch this year. And just to give my take on the trade part of it, I think if you can get 2 top 100 guys for him, you probably deal him, because look, he had health issues in the past. That's why he's a reliever now. He was going to be a starter, and they converted him because of the health stuff. So ultimately, if you're the GM and you can get a couple of can't miss prospects that play every day, or a starting pitcher, it's probably worth it. But either way, Miller is must-see TV right now. That's the bottom line through all of this. Is if you get a chance, if you're scrolling MLB.TV one night, and it's a West Coast games, and you see, looks like a save situation coming up, flip over, watch Mason Miller. You will not be disappointed.
Yeah, that's a great call there, MLB Network, for flipping over for at bats, just the 9th inning for Oakland. Absolutely, yeah, you've got to watch that. Yeah, right now, if you're looking at Fangraphs WAR going into Sunday, Colton Cowser, other than Mason Miller, is the only rookie in the AL right now with 1.0 wins above replacement. So, the crop right now in the American League has been a little bit low. Mason Miller is off to a huge start. I think we know how this can go. I had a vote last year in the National League Rookie of the Year award voting, and James Outman got off to such a hot start that a lot of people, I think, just kind of shut things down and said, okay, he's number 3. When you go and look, and if you're looking at on-base percentage and slugging percentage, Nolan Jones actually was better than Corbin Carroll was. Granted, one did it for a full season, one only did it for 4 months. So it's interesting how these conversations, once they start early, they do carry a lot of weight. So I don't think it's completely out of the question for him to do that. But like you said, if they're winning 74 games and it's because of this guy, and he's electric, and maybe fans start showing up a little bit more there in Oakland, and all of a sudden you're like, man, this is a real marquee player. Is he? If you'd rather have stock in one rookie over another having a better career, I think everyone would pick Wyatt Langford, Evan Carter, maybe even a Wilyer Abreu from the Red Sox, right? But right now, if we're just talking about 2024, I think Mason Miller as a Rookie of the Year award candidate, it's not bad. It is not bad, Ryan.
He's got a great shot at it. And you're talking about more people showing up in Oakland. I'm just thinking about the high tech light shows that we have everywhere. And what does that look like in Oakland? Like, what does he come out to? I'm sure there's not. Maybe they turn the lights on and off for a second. I don't know if they'll do much of anything when Mason Miller comes on.
Flashlight night. That's what it is. They're going to give away flashlights to everybody, or bring your own. BYOFL. Bring your own flashlight. And you're right. They dim the lights and everyone just flashes them. Or like in Field of Dreams, for anyone that might not know, and it looked like there was a stream of cars driving. They were all sitting in gridlock traffic, bumper to bumper. So they just flip their lights on and off, and it's simulated motion. So there you go. All you need is maybe 100 people to go and just run their hand in front of a flashlight, and it'll look like the entire ballpark is lit up.
That's what I was going to say. That's probably about how many flashlights you can get in there, because I don't know how many people are showing up, even for Mason Miller. It might be a couple hundred. Yeah, well, we'll see how that looks. Now I'm going to be curious to see what he comes out to. So it's got to be a good song at least. Has something iconic attached to him. But Mason Miller, like we've said, definitely a name to keep watching throughout the year. Our last topic of the day, we got a matchup coming up here between the Mariners and the Braves. And so we want to talk about a couple superstars. Who's better, Ronald Acuña Jr. or Julio Rodríguez? I think the fun part about this one is they're both guys who are way better than they've been so far this year. But you can make an argument going into the season, they each might have been. I know Acuña was definitely the favorite for NL MVP. I think a lot of people were taking Julio Rodríguez to finally become an MVP here in his third season. So what would your kind of initial reaction be if I just asked you the question, who's better, Ronald Acuña Jr. or Julio Rodríguez?
Shoot, you prefaced it by talking superstars. I thought you were going to say who's better, Jared Kelenic or Mitch Haniger. But okay, I can think on my feet, Acuña Jr. or Julio Rodríguez. As exciting of a ball player and as great as the smile is for Julio Rodríguez, I think Ronald Acuña Jr. is still just the better player. We've talked about it recently about Julio maybe putting that pressure on himself to say, can I go 40-70? Can I be 50-50? Whatever it is, I need to break the mold that Ronald Acuña Jr. broke, and they're following his lead in that way. And yeah, both those guys got off to slow starts. They're both heating up in many ways, but Ronald Acuña, I think, is just overall that marquee player. It's kind of like with Mookie Betts, where he's not flashy, and yet he's the best player in baseball. It's like Mookie Betts versus Fernando Tatis Jr. if you're talking about Southern California stars, right? One is just kind of consistent and lacks the flash, whereas the other one is all that and then some. And I think that's almost similar a little bit with Acuña Jr. and Julio Rodríguez, despite both of them just being regular dudes, and they're not over the top, right? But there's just something, I think, this intangible that Julio Rodríguez carries with him that gives him that little extra pop, whereas Acuña is going out there every day, doing it, grinding away to 70-plus stolen bases.
I think, crazily enough, Julio Rodríguez has been more marketable, or at least that's how Major League Baseball has positioned it, where I think it helped having the All-Star game in Seattle and the show that he put on in the Derby. That really raised his profile. But I see a lot of Julio Rodríguez on commercials, and I don't know if I'm missing them, but I don't know if I see quite as much of Acuña. It's crazy to me that Acuña is only 26. Looking at it now, like, I feel like he's been in the league forever, but he's still got a lot of career left. And he is so unbelievable with the stolen bases, with the power. I think the complete ball player, if you had to give me a choice on who I would take for the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, I think I would rather have Julio Rodríguez because he's playing center field. I think he brings more impact all around. But we just saw what Acuña did. We have never seen a J-Rod put up a season like that. So it's hard for me to argue the other side of saying that J-Rod is better than Acuña at this moment.
This is a great conversation, like Gunnar Henderson versus Bobby Witt Jr. Go back and listen to that one from just a few days ago. You talked about the marketability. Julio Rodríguez, I believe, it wasn't a podcast, but he had a YouTube show for the Mariners before he had even debuted, right? Speaks English incredibly well. So you don't have that same language barrier that other players from Latin American countries do have. They're both incredibly young, right, with their slow starts. And yet both of them are guys who signed those long-term extensions. One of them paid a lot better than the other. In fact, I think Julio Rodríguez is making more than double what Ronald Acuña make. I don't know who his agent was for that. But yeah, these two guys, it's going to be fun to watch them. And it would be great that you could have them in the same league, like a Gunnar Henderson and a Bobby Witt Jr. and maybe even better if they were in the same division. But I like that you maybe only get to see them once a year. It does become that marquee matchup between Acuña Jr. and Julio Rodríguez. As you mentioned, Julio can play that premier defense in center field. But with Acuña, both of them have been MVP kind of guys, right? Like I think we know that, but Acuña at the top of that lineup, number one, when he goes, the team goes, right? And since the start of the last season, Atlanta has nearly a 700 winning percentage when he records at least one hit in the first inning. And I say it that way because he's gotten a hit twice in the first inning in the past. So when he goes, Atlanta goes. And I think that just sets the table, and it's the first domino to get so much more of that going. And I think eventually that probably will be true for Seattle. But if we're talking about right now, I still got to stick with Ronald Acuña Jr.
It's pretty crazy that these guys have each only hit one home run this year. That's
Right?
nuts to me. We're 25 plus games in for both of them, and it's one home run. I think very similarly too. When J-Rod gets going, the team gets going. I mean, we're seeing the Mariners finally start to take off a little bit. There's been two things that I think have coincided with that. Their rotation has been unbelievable the last 2 weeks, and Julio Rodríguez starting to hit for a higher average and pull himself out of it a little bit. I think with both of these guys, we sort of expect that home run total to at least clear 30. So when you're getting this far into the year and it's only at one, I'm just imagining the fireworks they're going to set off in the middle of this summer here when it gets hotter. Maybe these guys heat up as well and start putting up some big totals. But yeah, it's a conversation that I think we followed for years. Right now, Acuña better, but I think long term I like J-Rod. So I think we could both agree on right now, which is where we'll kind of close here on who's better in the long haul. If you had to pick one of them, contract aside, if we put the contract in it, we'll take Acuña. But contract aside, who is the outfielder you would build your franchise around right now?
I think it also would be Julio Rodríguez, and some of that has to do with the fact that he had to get his right knee repaired. Acuña Jr. did. So there is a little bit of that history concern that you have, a lot less so after stealing 70 bases last year. Obviously, everything's okay with that, but that is, I think, somewhat of a concern. Julio is a little bit younger. I think he might flash a little bit more power there, being the center fielder that he is, and kind of being surrounded by a great core of players. So is Acuña Jr. But I think Seattle's group is just a little bit younger, and I think just might have a little bit more of that projectability in that window of contention. So in that capacity, yeah, I think I'd be happy with either of those guys, no doubt about it. But yeah, you know what? Going forward, if we're just saying on April 28th, 2024, until these two guys retire, I would also like to have Julio Rodríguez.
I think if I was to pick one superstar in baseball for my team, regardless of position, just I could pick any guy. If I had a fantasy draft tomorrow and I'm the Mets GM and I'm picking one, it'd be hard not to take the 23-year-old superstar center fielder that's going to fill up the ballpark as well as do everything he's going to do on the field. But the marketability stuff is another thing that teams would also pay attention to, and J-Rod has the it factor. We thought this was the year he'd put it all together, and maybe it is. The slow start, in some ways, a little more disappointing from J-Rod because I think this was a more pivotal year. But these guys, you can't go wrong picking either of them. It's two of the best players in baseball. That's why baseball is in really good shape right now, because there's a lot of great stars that we can look on.
Yeah, it's exciting, and I think you'd probably want J-Rod just because maybe he'd give you like Ichiro Suzuki's cell number, and maybe you could kind of bring him through to the ballpark, hang out with him. I mean, he seems to be friends with just about everybody. It very much is like Ken Griffey Jr. 2.0 in many ways, and that's nothing but a compliment for him.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So now, as we come to a close for the show today, we like to do this heading into a new week on our Sunday episode. Which series are you most looking forward to this week? We've talked about a couple of great ones. Do we just have to set the Orioles Yankees one aside and say, okay, that's the best one, and let's talk about the other ones? I think that's number one. But Seattle Atlanta is a fun series to look at as well here.
Yeah, these teams early on in the year where everyone's pretty much around 500, and even if they're not, you can make excuses for them, right? There's a lot of good matchups, I think, early on in the week. I like Cubs going to New York, right? Cubs are still trying to really get things going and get it moving, where the Mets definitely seem to have gotten that momentum. So I think that's a real fun one to see those two lock horns, Tyon versus Luis Severino on Monday. I definitely would put that one at the top of my list. I know Arizona is struggling right now in a major way with injuries up and down. So them getting the Dodgers at home, maybe they can, exercise those demons in a good way. Say, hey, demons, help us out, and let's see if we get 4 home runs again in an inning against the Dodgers like we did in the NLDS. That was absolutely amazing witnessing that. So I think I'm interested to see how much moxie, how much the depth of the Diamondbacks can kind of contribute in a series where right now they look incredibly overmatched. For you, other than the Mets, and share it if you'd like, who are you looking forward to watching go against one another this week?
Well, I'm looking forward to Mark Vientos getting another start or getting a start. Okay. Yeah. How about that? Got to give Vientos a shout out. We've been talking baseball for an hour and I didn't talk about a walk-off homer today. So there you go, Mark. That one's for you. Real talk though, looking around the league, Royals Blue Jays, they just squared off. And so I'm kind of interested there because I'm just fascinated by this Royals team, seeing what they are at this point. Um, Padres, Reds, a couple teams that I think will be in the thick of the wild card race throughout the year. That's another one that I think looks good. And then Rays, Brewers. That's we've kind of compared those two teams a bunch on this show. The analytical small markets that perform better than they should. Well, they got to go head to head this week. So a lot of good baseball ahead for us for sure. Before we record on Wednesday, I think we'll try to stick consistent to around this time, night times. 8 o'clock potentially on Wednesday. We'll have our next episode of Who's Better Baseball. Make sure you go over to our YouTube channel, subscribe there, follow all the different videos. We'll be breaking up today's podcast into a bunch of smaller episodes and also our audio feeds, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe there on X. Where are we at, Patrick?
At Who's Better BB.
Who's Better BB. You can follow me at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow Patrick at Patrick D. Lyons. We'll be back with another stream on Wednesday.